Give it to their brothers and sisters. It's Margaret Arfa, and I have the honor of welcoming our authors today. Today we have three authors, the first of which, novelist Mike DeCapite. Mike DeCapite's books include the novel Through the Windshield and the collection of short prose, Radiant Fog. He will read from his latest novel, Jacket Weather, published by Soft Skull in 2021, about which Google Books says, Nick Hornby meets Patti Smith. Mean Streets meets A Visit from the Goon Squad in this quintessential New York story about two people who knew each other in the downtown music scene in the 1980s, meet again in the present day and fall in love. Chris Kraus calls it poetic and compulsively readable. Please welcome Mike DeCapite and wish him a happy early birthday.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, so most of this is from Jacket Weather. When I walked in on Thursday, Lou was sitting at his locker, still red from the steam. He had 3 cans of coffee for me, in exchange for the magazines I'd been taking him from work. Every week, I took him 5 copies of People and Entertainment Weekly, and he gave them to women on his rounds. I didn't want anything for them, but he was Italian, so he enjoyed transactions. He was at the age when a person starts putting things aside for people and carrying them around in bags. Pieces of interest, clipped from newspapers, and coupons, and canned tomatoes. Come to think of it, so was I with these magazines. This is how it starts. I thanked him for the coffee and went to my locker. "What'd you eat this weekend?" he said from his row. "Where'd you go?" "Nowhere, I cooked." "What'd you make, pasta fazool?" "No, I made linguine with clams." "The red?" "No, the white." "What'd you do?" he said. I made my way to the end of the row. I said, "I softened a shallot in oil. I put red pepper flakes." "Parsley?" he said. "Yeah, parsley, oregano, then a half a cup of white wine and the juice from the clams." "You used the canned? What'd you buy, Snow's?" "Cento." "Oh, you bought the clam sauce?" "No, chopped clams." "I didn't know they made that. I'll have to look for that." "Yeah, so I put those in about a minute before I drained the pasta and squeezed some lemon juice." Lou frowned, approving. He was applying his facial cream. We were naked this whole time. I went back to my locker, got into my gear. I said, "What about you? Where'd you go?" "I cooked." "Yeah, what'd you make?" "Linguine with clams." "The white?" "No, I made the red this time, with the whole baby clams from the can." "What kind?" "Doxies," he said. "What kind of linguine did you buy?" "Barilla," I said. "You?" "De Cecco. That's good pasta." "De Cecco is great, but it's $2.50 a box." "They got it Western beef, $1 a box." There's that moment after you open your eyes, just a few seconds before you put the world back together, before you're anyone in particular. You're looking at a slice of light between the window frame and the shade. Then you take up your identity with its memories and preconceptions, and it's the same day as yesterday. But now I remember June. I wake up in my old life, and then I remember I'm in a new life, and lie there, listening to the birds and the BQE, morning docked at the window like an ocean liner. We walked out of the Giglio Festival and under the BQE with a bag of Zeppeli. I had the Zeppeli, who am I kidding? Behind us, the lights on the rides were blinking in the dusk. She said, "I hate that ride, that gravity-defying ride." I give them all a wide berth. "What rides do you like?" "I like the Cyclone." "Doesn't surprise me that you like roller coasters." "That's what I like, Mike. I like punk music and roller coasters." The sky is gray and God is on the breeze. We're on the top deck of the Fire Island ferry, June and I, As the boat picks up speed and foam peels off the hull, we're reading a paper someone left behind, the obituaries. If you ever place an obituary for me, she says, don't put my age in it. Leave that out. Even when you're dead, no one should know your age? That's right. No one should know that, ever. No one needs to know that. Really? I always tell people how old you are. What do you say? I say I'm having dinner with June. She's 52, you know. No, don't say that. People say, what'd you do this weekend? I say, I went to the movies with my older girlfriend. Don't ever say that. If someone asks, they don't ask. I volunteer. I know you do. From now on, you say, I'm not sure exactly. She's in her early 50s. That's all you have to say from now on, from now until I die. Got it. She was born in the early 50s. No. I'm not sure exactly. I know she was born in the 50s, the early 50s. I'm going to hurt you. In your sleep, I'll hurt you. I'll shave off all your hair. She was born sometime back in the early 50s. Your eyebrows. How'd you like that? I was at my locker getting dressed. Here, you're a big jazz fan, Lou said. Read this. I'm not a big jazz fan, but he once heard me mention Ornette Coleman, and because Lou tends to place the people he knows at the top of their respective fields, it pleases him to think of me as a top jazz guy. I took the clipping, which came, as these pieces often did, from the Italian-American Herald, a paper in New Jersey. Lou's a subscriber. He said, jazz was invented by Italians. No kidding. Ever hear of Nick LaRocca? No. Cornet player from New Orleans, wrote the Tiger Rag, Sicilian. Ask him, he said, indicating Philly on his stool. Philly was pulling on a pair of pants of a color I can't quite name, somewhere between yellow and pink. Ask me what? Philly said. Ask me anything. I know everything. Ever hear of Nick LaRocca? I said. No. He knows nothing, Lou said. Would a guy who knows nothing wear these pants? I said, you're claiming jazz now for the Italians? At one time, there were 500,000 Italians in New Orleans. Sure, I said, look at Cosimo Matassa. That's right, he said, he just died. How about Cosimo Matassa, he asked Philly. I know Cosimo Matassa, Philly said. He invented linguine. On Driggs Avenue, Maggie May was coming out of one of the windows of one of the cars at the light, and it reopened a place inside of me, part imagination, part memory, part ache for a time after which you never feel life quite so sharply again. The everlasting September. The mandolin player took his extra half measure the very moment when summer ends, that last of it, after Labor Day. I cut between cars and could hear him hanging on. He held this glistening moment captive in a repeated phrase. And finally, after the band came back in and he knew the spell was slipping, he started changing it up, trying one thing and another to hold time still as the song moved on. Up over Metropolitan, a flight of pigeons flashed and turned. She was meeting me at a tailor on Washington Street. My phone rang. I'm a little turned around, she said. I'm on Hudson and Horatio. Lived her whole life in New York, but when it comes to directions, she's always wrong. I told her to walk toward the river on Horatio. Then I went to the corner and waited. It was a nothing Saturday. There was no one around, but pretty soon she came along across the street. She had her hair pushed up under a floppy cap, black and white checks, and she was halfway up the block before she saw me and started laughing. She was the only person on the street, so anyone looking out the window would have figured she's crazy. Right then, she did seem a little zany, even to me, but with everything I could want in her, the spark, the joy, the innocence, the party spirit. I wished my father could have met her. I wished he could have seen her walking up that red brick street, laughing at life. Waiting behind a dirty windshield on Kenmare Street, There's red light caught in the grain of the road and in the steam rising from an exhaust pipe. Just waiting in this heat of consciousness I call my life. Right now is where it hurts to miss you, the parts I know I won't remember. This is where real life is, down in the folds of time's fan. Then the steam turns green. Monday, I walked past Lou at his locker. I didn't see you this weekend, he said. You were here? I was here. Night we stayed home. You cooked? I made pasta with garlic and oil. What'd you do? I went back to him. I said, my friend Tammy gave me a truffle slicer. I used it for the garlic. Red pepper flakes. Parsley, he said. Yeah, parsley at the end with the lemon. Romano? I used Romano last night. What about you? I said. Same thing. I made pasta with garlic and oil. I ate the whole pound. You ate a pound of linguine? I used vermicelli. I haven't had that in a long time. DiCecco? Ronzoni, he said. It was on sale, 3 pounds for $2. Now, Painter Joe was there. He was unwinding his wraps and hanging them in his locker. Yesterday, he told us about the Lanzetti brothers from South Philly. 6 brothers, 5 named after popes, all gangsters. Pius, Leo, Teo, Lucian, Ignatius, and Willie, all mob guys. He said, you got to reserve a cup of the pasta water. Lou said, how about linguine fini? Ever use that? I made it the other night. Garlic and oil and breadcrumbs I used. Yeah. This opened a discussion of different techniques for linguine with garlic and oil. Painter Joe, in a jockstrap, said he uses a couple of anchovies. A man drying his balls down the aisle said he adds a squeeze of lemon. Lou tucked his shirt in and squatted to settle into his pants. He doesn't saute his garlic. He throws it in fresh at the end. There's always something else, I said. You're never done with pasta. A continuing fascination, Lou said. He was combing his hair in the mirror. You're never done. Okay, it's the last one. I'm walking up Havemeyer when I think, I'd really like a popsicle. Of all things, right? All of a sudden I want a popsicle. I haven't thought about a popsicle in 40 years. Out of nowhere. It's like you're at the mercy of any stray thought. Nixon was president the last time I had a popsicle. But it's a hot day, I quit smoking, whatever it was, I want a popsicle. So I go to a bodega, but they don't have regular popsicles. All they got is crazy, multicolored confections, part tickler, part fireworks, or those long frozen plastic things that burn the back of your throat. I just want a regulation, old-fashioned twin pop, like when I was a kid. So I go to the supermarket, but you have to buy a box. The smallest box is 12. So I buy a box of 12. And that night, I'm lying around watching The Sopranos or something. I eat 6 of them. I quit smoking maybe 3 months before, and you need something to do while you're watching these shows. When I smoked, I could watch 5, 6 episodes back to back. Because you're smoking, you're sort of involved with the action. Cigarettes make you part of the action. You're not just lying there. I can't just lie there and watch these assholes for 5 hours with nothing to do. I need something. Anyway, I ate half the box, 6 popsicles. And the next night, because it's there again, and again with the TV, I finished the box. And now, because I did it 2 nights in a row, it's like a little routine. I make a habit out of everything. So night 3, on my way home from work, I stop and buy another box of 12 popsicles. I don't know what my relationship status was at this point, that I was free to lie around watching The Sopranos every night eating popsicles. Maybe I was with June and we weren't seeing each other at night till her divorce came through. I must have been with June because I was only able to quit smoking as part of my Stay Alive program with her, good faith gesture. The popsicles I wouldn't tell her about, it's too idiotic. Every night back and forth to the kitchen, now I'll have a red one, now I'll have a purple one. Sometimes taking 2 at a time, so one of them can start to melt while I'm eating the other one because it's better when they soften up a little. So this goes on for maybe a week. Every 3 nights I go to the supermarket and buy a dozen popsicles until I go there one night and there are no more boxes of 12. I cleaned them out. There's only a box of 24. So I have no choice. I buy the box of 24. I cross the line into the unknown, figuring, this is crazy, but it'll last me 4 days. And that night, I ate the entire box. 24 popsicles, back and forth to the freezer, now cherry, now grape, now orange, lying on my back, peering over my belly like a seal with the remote in one hand and a popsicle in the other and the window fan blowing. Take a disc out, turn it over, start another one, and the sticks and wrappers piling up on that table beside the clock with its minute hand going around and around on this orgy of popsicles. You look at a clock during something like this and you realize you're on your own. There's no one watching, no one in charge. Nothing prevents you from degenerating to madness and savagery except some voice in the back of your mind. Probably by the end, I was just trying to get it over with, get finished with The Sopranos and finish off this box so I could close the book on this whole sorry chapter and get on with my life. Nevertheless, I did eat 24 twin pops in one night. I woke up the next morning with a purple tongue and a rash on both arms. And now I know I can never have another drink. I can never just buy a bag of dope someday for the hell of it, or an 8-ball because I've got people in town. Whatever it is, I can't do it. I can never smoke even one cigarette without mutating into some type of fiend. I have to just forget about all that and get on with it. Just get on with what's left of my life. Yes, just keep my head down and set off across the ice. A little wiser, a little older, a little more embarrassed, because now this is another thing you're capable of, another absurdity. You like yourself a little less. It's like you wash a pet, and you see what kind of scrawny, abject little creature has been living under there all this time. It's hard to feel the same about it after. But what are you going to do? Get rid of the pet? You're stuck with the pet like you're stuck with yourself. So on you go.
Thank you so much, Mr. DeCapite. And now I don't think I can really get anything else for dinner except pasta. You've made it sound so delicious. Our next author is biographer Victor Bockris. Victor Bockris was friend and confidant to Andy Warhol, William Burroughs, Joe Ramone, and many other key figures in the 70s and 80s downtown scene. His Telegraph Books imprint published Patti Smith's first poetry collection in 1972. He appears in the film Downtown 81, starring Debbie Harry and Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's the author of over 20 books, of which The Life and Death of Andy Warhol is considered a classic. He is currently writing a memoir with the working title of In Search of the Magic Universe. Tonight he will read excerpts from his books on Andy Warhol, Keith Richards, and Lou Reed. Please welcome Victor Bockris.
Would you rather have a chair?
That's a good idea. Yeah. That is text I want to read. Yeah.
Do we have?
Thanks. What a great entrance.
That's right. But you must have hit you.
I'm okay, man.
Yeah?
Okay.
You're bleeding a little bit.
I'm okay.
Yeah. I'll leave this here for you.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, it's very appropriate I should fall over because I want to read you a little bit about from my book on Andy Warhol. And Andy Warhol was a very vulnerable artist in the very early 60s, you know. It was a very violent time. The Kennedy administration and that whole period until the president was shot in 1963 was a very rich period for Andy Warhol. He was very much engaged in his work was very much reacting to what was going on in the country at the time, and he did a lot of paintings in that period that were, you know, like he did this Death and Disaster in America series that just paintings of car crashes and suicides and all sorts of ways of death, you know. And he painted a lot of people who were on the edge of death, like Marilyn Monroe when she committed suicide, or Jackie Kennedy after the assassination. He was very much on the edge of the reality of the early 60s as opposed to the glamour of it, you know. And I think Warhol is an enormously important artist to be aware of today. I think if you, anyone just on their own or with other people want to make a study of Andy Warhol and get some sense of his encounter with the United States, and it made him like one of the greatest artists of his times, you know. And also that he went on from he did that between 1962 and 1964. And then he went on in the next 2 or 3 years to become the greatest underground filmmaker in the world, pretty much. You know. So he was conquering, not conquering as much as meeting the images, these forms that were coming up to him from what was happening in the American culture at the time. It was a culture that had a lot to do with death. The Vietnam War was heating up. The civil rights stuff was heating up. It was a very, you know, very violent time in the United States. And Andy Warhol was the artist who confronted that more than any other visual artist of that time. He's a premier pop artist and premier artist of his times, really. And he's very important to be aware of now because we don't have leaders or artists like Andy Warhol in our culture today. We don't have people who inspire us through their work and their activities to gather around that flag, as it were, you know. So what I want to read tonight is I want to read to you about the time he was shot. I don't know how many people here realize Andy Warhol was shot and almost killed. In fact, he was killed in 1968 during the summer of assassinations when Martin Luther King was assassinated and Andy Warhol and then Robert Kennedy was assassinated the next day. You know, it was this time, this horrible time. And before I read this, I just want to say to you that that Andy, because of his engagement with what was really happening in American culture, lived in a very dangerous environment of a very electrically live cultural world that was on the world stage through the American media. And his shooting is really very much a part of American history, although that's not normally what's written in books. The fact he was shot in between Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, and the day before Robert Kennedy, he's part of a trilogy of killings. Because, you know, on Martin Luther King's case, it's a racial killing, it's a political killing. In the state of, Warhol, it's a cultural killing. He's a culture hero. I remember there's a great article in Newsweek magazine at that time when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, saying that Robert Kennedy and Andy Warhol had a lot in common. They were both culture heroes. And in those days, through the media and what was happening, I guess, generally, in the sense, to the extent which art was making really impact on society, culture heroes are people who defined way of life for their followers, you know. And Andy Warhol had quite a large following internationally, as well as here, as did Robert Kennedy. And so their shootings are not unrelated. So anyway. This is very difficult to read. So the scene is that Andy Warhol has just moved into a new factory. He's moved away from the great silver factory of the 60s into more business-like offices, where he's beginning to run his business. And a woman from the past, from the silver factory, named Valerie Solanas, a radical feminist, writer, and activist, was coming to see him in the middle of June, early June, 1968. And Andy's very open to this. He doesn't reject people that want to come and see him. He'll see them. But on that particular day, she came over to shoot him. She came over to kill him. And he had no idea, of course, this is going to happen. So the scene that's set up is that we're in the second factory on 33 Union Square in New York. And Andy's talking on the telephone. And other people in the room are working. They're talking on the phone. They're talking to people. They're doing things. And Valerie Solanas, who's in the room, pulls a gun. Let me see if I can get that part. Valerie reached slowly into her paper bag and withdrew her .32 automatic. She pointed it at Warhol. Still nobody paid any attention. In that frozen second, only Andy saw what was really happening. Surprised, he dropped the phone, jumped from the desk, and started to move, looking directly into the woman's pinched face. "No, no, Valerie," he repeated, screamed, "don't do it!" Solanas fired a second time. Andy fell to the floor and tried to crawl underneath the desk, the glass-top desk. But she moved in, placed the paper bag on the desk, and taking aim more carefully, fired again. Her third bullet aimed in Andy's right side. It punctured both of his lungs, his spleen, and his esophagus before exiting on the, where I lost my punch. He felt a horrible, horrible pain, as if a firecracker had exploded inside me, and started screaming and writhing on the floor. Blood pumped from his chest, soaking through his T-shirt and splattering the white telephone cord. It hurt so much, he told friends later, "I wished I was dead." So Valerie Solanas, meanwhile, after shooting him, escapes through the elevator down the floor. And as soon as she escapes, everyone in the factory has been hiding behind doors while the shooting's happening, rushes up. So as soon as the elevator door shut, pandemonium broke out. Billy Name, Paul Morrissey, Mario Maya, and Jed Johnson rushed up to Andy, screaming and shouting orders and suggestions. Mario saw blood all over Andy. It was just awful, just horrible. Fred crawled across the floor to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but because of the holes in Andy's lungs, it was an impossible task and unbearably painful. It hurts, Fred, it hurts, Andy croaked. He felt that he could not take in a deep breath, no matter how much he tried to expand his chest cavity. Every time he did, air would enter through the wounds as well as through the mouth and escape through his lungs. He turned away, Fred desisted, and picked up the telephone to call for an ambulance. They were all uncertain what to do. Blood was spreading the floor, and Andy was saying, I can't breathe. In fact, Andy was dying. Billy Name started to cry, which made Andy laugh. How's this possible? Oh, please don't make me laugh, Billy, he whispered. Please, it hurts too much, so much. Warhol was wheeled into the emergency room at 4:45, 23 minutes after he had been shot. A call had been placed for the ambulance, which announced estimated time of arrival, and a critical condition, an emergency operating room had been prepared. 3 nurses and a team of doctors headed by Dr. Giuseppe Rossi, a crack surgeon who had been on his way home, came when the report came and were waiting for him. They had no idea who their patient was. The stretcher was wheeled straight through the operating room. The doctors clustered around the body and began to take its vitals signs. The pulse was faint. They attached an EKG, set the catheter to determine the state of his kidneys. Began to examine the wounds. During these few moments in the operating room, Andy was semi-conscious and heard voices muttering, "Forget it," and "no chance." Mario Maya, who had been shot at the same time as Andy, was a friend of his at the factory, was lying on another stretcher next to him, and he started up screaming, "Don't you know who this is? It's Andy Warhol. He's famous and he's rich. He can afford to pay for an operation. For God's sake, do something." Spurred on by the urgency in a man's voice, Dr. Rossi determined to try to save him. He began to cut open Andy's chest. The first step was to massage the heart. Meanwhile, in the waiting room of the hospital, all the superstars have gathered to give interviews to the press. An English superstar says, Andy's shooting was definitely a blow against the Cultural Revolution. We're constantly being attacked. All right. So now I'm going to read some stuff other people said about him around this time. Andy believed you should not alter the way things really are. This is about making films. You have to let happen just the way they happen, even if it happened to himself. He handled people by not handling them. A lot of people became very petulant and uncontrollable as a result. And he watched as though he was watching inside of a cave. He, of course, manipulated their emotions, and a lot of people around him became very emotional. They were all like fallen angels. The general atmosphere was conducive to corruption. And he was a very serious guy, not a fool at all, and very shrewd. He was completely detached from the things that were going on around him. He was living in the middle of a vortex, and he really put up with a lot of shit. It was a very dangerous philosophy, and his own good nature could have created a very dangerous situation. It was like walking around in a gasoline-filled room holding a match. But I had a feeling he was very tough and would outlast all of us. Peter Sheldow, the great art critic of the New Yorker who died recently, wrote this about Andy. For a short while, roughly 1962, 1964, Andy Warhol was a great painter, one of the best in this half of the 20th century. Like most modern artists, the halcyon Warhol was both radical and conservative, looking both forward and backward in cultural time. He inserted painting in a humiliating semiotic continuum as one medium among many of the mass meat culture, and two, made great paintings, initially appearing to ridicule the preciousness of art with a technique of mass production. Warhol and his silkscreen, actually a clumsy and messy artisan device, finally mocked mass production and exalted painting. This is possible because for a while Andy Warhol was onto something serious: chaos systems, entropy, human madness, and death, as a crack in the wall through which could be glimpsed of violent bliss. It was only a glimpse, but in its after image will linger for as long as Warhol's paintings are shown and seen. Now, the last bit I'm going to read is a monologue by a writer called Ronnie Tavell, who worked very closely with Andy on making the movies he made in 1963, 1964. And he just talks about the relationship they had. I didn't judge him. I didn't feel anything. It was an artist. I do not remember him as somebody loved or well-loved. I remember him as, in point of fact, as the opposite, as somebody hated. He began to become a humanoid, which is what he was thought of as, at the time, the whole direction of moving towards the 21st century as humanoids has no holes in it. But I could see how people could be frightened of it. People were also frightened of Andy because he was a media figure. I would never tell anybody he was likable. Undine once said to me, Drella, she's not good to have friends. Andy was so evil because he'd screw a lot of people. But I was an objective about it. I was learning a great deal from working with him. He was turning me into a different kind of writer. The Dexies and the Obertrol, like Adderall today, made him so edgy he did tend to take them at the factory when he got nervous. Once he went through a black period during which he did a lot of pacing. It was in between two big projects. He paced a great deal. And even when I would sit and talk with him, he would sketch figures of little boys and girls floating in the air. I thought it was a sign of great tension to revert to something as short as that. While he was talking to you, he was knocking them off a mile a minute and dropping them on the floor. Then he would walk on them. I remember him also walking on the paintings on the floor during this period. It was just a normal interim between projects. But in those days, we all worked at such a feverish pace that the pregnancy periods between one big project and another would make everybody nervous. I saw Andy as cold and isolated, like a continuation in art of Samuel Beckett. And when I was a kid, there was no arguing with Beckett. His was the last icy, horrifying, unarguable word. That was the tradition Andy belonged to, the icy, classical, unapproachable, airtight, very negative and nihilistic. The uproar over his reaction to Freddie Herker's suicide was sentimental soap opera bullshit. If you're talking about somebody who can take a position with Beckett, you're talking about something which is much more serious than crying over somebody's death. This was art. In those days, I knew him, and Andy, was uncompromising, didn't give an inch, nor would an artist ask him to. When I worked with him, that was a true artistic period in which nobody would dare to ask you to be anything less than your best as an artist. When I knew him, he was a pure artist and certainly a great artist. This was authentic, hardcore, steely art, and that's all. It was not to be argued with. Thank you. Can you help me get down?
Thank you so much, Mr. Bockris. It's a rare day that the microphone has to be raised for me. It makes me feel taller, which is very nice. Our next author is poet Tom DeGidio. Tom DeGidio lived among the artists, musicians, and writers of downtown Manhattan in the 70s and 80s. He is a member of the Suppose and Eyes poetry group at Penn's Kelly Writers House and serves as director-at-large at the New York Browning Society. He has written for Salon.com. His poetry chapbook, The Enigma of Arrival, is published by Underground Books. He is currently completing a novel set in downtown Manhattan, 1980, and translating Italian poets. Tonight he will read 4 elegies in memory of deceased presences on the downtown scene. Please welcome Tom DeGidio.
Thank you, thank you. That might, yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to read 4 short elegies about Kathy Acker, Tom Verlaine, Cookie Mueller, and Jean-Michel Basquiat. And these are brief elegies that present aspects of these people that, for those of you who are already familiar with them, isn't the usual kind of thing maybe that you hear about them. I don't know. This is Kathy Acker with her friend and mentor, Bill Burroughs. And can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. And this is very much her. And so I'm going to read. And I'm going to say their names and the dates of their births and deaths. Most of them died rather young, with one exception. For Kathy Acker, April 18th, 1948, November 30th, 1997. So she made it all the way to, what is that? That's late 40s? For Kathy Acker, the air flickered when you blew into town, full-on smash and grab mode, begging Susan Sontag that night at the Mud Club to teach you English, please, for free. The air spasmed as you willed that seeming wreckage. Your real life was still happening far away. You needed to write it in the self-propelled chaos that was your Parisian coffee house in the Europe of the downtown scene. You were the pirate queen in a sea of pirates. The song you inspired was Jill's "Don't Steal My Boyfriend." You had to fight to keep the dark weight of your novels from smothering you in your sleep, to steal back reality in order to see. So that was Kathy Acker. Next is Tom Verlaine with his one-time girlfriend, you may recognize, Patti Smith. He's the longest lived of all these people. He just died in January. He was 73. Tom Verlaine, December the 13th, 1949, January 28th, 2023. For Tom Verlaine, you don't expect the rock star to be a cart shark at the bookstore, hanging out with the books of poetry, from which he took the name Verlaine. Overcoat collar turned up against the cold, socializing with the rest of us sidewalk hunters, rooting through the dollar cart, already jealously clutching that Romain Rolland biography of Ludwig van Beethoven. An evening ritual outside the Strand bookstore of an evening, 1 foot like the rest of us now in that deep past when even bad weather felt sensuous, when we all walked around downtown with our portable womb, getting ready to be reborn as Cocteau, Baudelaire, Rimbaud, Verlaine. In our new Paris, you are almost always there of an evening until you're not there anymore. The third elegy is for Cookie Mueller, and here she is with John Waters. You may recognize her from John Waters' films, Pink Flamingo and so forth. But she was, among other things, a very brilliant writer and probably the best read person just about downtown. For Cookie Mueller, March 2nd, 1949, November 10th, 1989. She was 40 years old. For Cookie Mueller, you walked down the street with your friends, singing each to each, like it was a party happening. Procession, part of the downtown whirlpool's drift. Mermaid's conjunction of grace and song. Your slow-burning happiness, so legible, it made photographers famous. Bringing up the rear, more present tense than any of us could ever be, you walked down Prince Street like it was a party happening. Slow burn of your happiness leaves a trace there yet, where you turned, smiled, all heart, your lips forming the word, hun. Finally, for Jean-Michel Basquiat, December 22nd, 1960, August 12th, 1988, only 27 at the time of his demise. For Jean-Michel Basquiat, when you disappeared at the height of summer, your paintings knew nothing of your death. There was just the phone ringing and Jennifer's voice saying only the words, "Jean's dead," on the other end. Soundtrack for the movie of you across the table crying. Your bad boy antics never helped you feel any better. I have to admit that I enjoyed watching you throw your garbage out your studio window, timing it perfectly to land on the heads of that collector couple exiting below. Making paintings was the only real diversion for you, Jean. You scrawled the words, "to repel ghosts," across one of them. Should I risk having my words attract your ghost, Jean? What's the worst that could happen? One of your trademark stink bombs? Your tears staining my manuscript page? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. DiGidio. And now we will have a Q&A session with all of our authors. So any questions you have about the readings, their other work, or their lives, you'll be able to ask now. Well, no, you have to come up to this.
Just let me tell the audience about restroom situations, so if anybody needs to.
Okay.
I'm kind of filling in for Gina Renzi tonight, impromptu. She's a mystery. She's been the coordinator of all these events.
You could have one for the, or give it to the audience and pass it around. Okay.
And, yeah, she deserves some applause. Just wanted to let you know, there's an all-gender, I won't say all-purpose restroom, right back there. And also functioning restrooms downstairs too, but you be careful going down, it's cold. All right?
Okay, let's go.
Alrighty, if any of you would like to raise your hand to ask a question, I'll bring the microphone to you, but just to get us started off, I have one question for Mr. DeCapite. Mr. DeCapite, when you were writing your novel and choosing to have it switch between decades so dramatically, do you think that the switch in time period affected the types of relationships and interactions that your characters could have?
No, but this book is about, it's a love story about two people who knew each other when they knew each other when they were 27. They were not together as a couple when they were 27. They knew each other then, and then they get together as a couple like 30 years later. So, it's about me and June, my partner, and because I knew her when she was 27, she still she looks like that to me. You see people like the way you first met them, and in a way, my view of New York is the same, because whenever it was that I first started going to New York in the, say, mid 80s, a lot of that's gone, but you and I would see two different New Yorks if we walked across 14th Street, because I would be picking up details that I remember from before, and a whole different aspect of the city would light up for you. So in that way, the passage of time affects my relationship with the people I talk to at the gym or with the things I see on the street.
Thank you. Now, would anyone in the audience like to ask a question?
Did you ever see Gray, the band, and did you have any experience with that side of things
No.
at that time?
I think they were, I left New York for a while, about 12 years, and went to San Francisco. So there was a period of that I didn't see.
I can answer that question. I knew them personally, but I never heard them play. Because it was that kind of, Vincent Gallo, and I'm not an expert on the band, but Gray. Did you hear them play? Once? Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so it just didn't happened because, it was, how can I explain it? They probably didn't play that many shows. That's probably true too. But, I should have made an effort. I should have made an effort. In retrospect.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, well, Mr. DeGidio, now that you're talking, I do have a question for you. You chose to write your elegies in the form of poetry. Do you think that what made you choose to do that? And then also, do you think that poetry creates a greater feeling of intimacy than memoir or biography, since it relies less on the facts of people's lives and more on their emotional impact?
Well, one of the utilities of poetry is that it can be a kind of shorthand, and you can kind of pack a lot into a few lines, and something that might take 20 pages of prose you could put into 14, 14, yeah. That's one of the best things. That's one of the best things about it. It also can make it at times difficult to do. And these were especially difficult pieces to write because they're not normal poems for me. For me, a normal poem is you get an idea for the poem and you write it. It's like it starts with maybe a line that comes from you. Yeah, also that, and but these were like what the term for them is occasional poems.
Yeah, it's almost
And
like an assignment.
yes, exactly. And I don't like assignments, even when I'm the person assigning it. And I see some eminent poets here tonight, so I better shut up because.
Well, it's like the difference between
I don't want to lecture some poets that probably know more about it all than I do.
Thank you so much, Mr. DeGidio. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
By the way, my name is William Burrison, not Burroughs. I have a question for Vic. You've gotten to know Lou Reed, and you worked with Lou Reed and wrote about him, and so I'm sure you... I have two questions. This is the first, and they won't be that hard for you. You must have known Laurie Anderson a bit too, so not Patti Smith. We can get confused. How do you view their love relationship, and what do you think they had in common as far as their talent or genius?
I think Laurie was the one really successful relationship with Lou's life with a woman. His previous ones were always like pretty short and sometimes sort of mentally violent. But he had a wonderful relationship with Laurie, and Laurie opened up a whole world to him of the arts. Lou had been very stuck in the rock and roll world. And Laurie crossed all barriers as a performance artist, going in and out of various different forms. So she started taking Lou into other things than just playing rock concerts. And they started to travel together in between things and stuff. It enriched his life enormously, and he made some really good albums about it too. Lou's last albums, his last album is called Lulu. It was made with Metallica backing him. It's an amazing story. He played with Metallica once at some award ceremony, and they agreed to get together. And so he suggested that he come out. They had 10 days free from their schedule. He said, I'll come out and write some songs, make a record. So they did. And this is called Lulu, in which Lou is actually very ill and dying, and he confronts his many ghosts and admits up to various things in the songs he wrote and stuff. It's a really wonderful one. It's probably maybe one of the greatest things he ever recorded. I think it's his greatest album because it's so completely confessional and so completely beautifully done. Because at that point he knows how to do this. He knows how to do this kind of music. He's struggling all his life to find it. He found it in Lulu. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
better than answers it.
Okay.
And my other question is, you wrote about Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, spent some time at his training camp, I'll bet, in Pennsylvania. And you wrote about a great writer, William Burroughs. Did they ever get to meet, do you think? And who might have gotten the better of whom in terms of wit?
Well, William Burroughs never met Muhammad, but I actually took Andy Warhol to meet Muhammad Ali in August 16th, 1977, which is the same day Elvis Presley died. That Andy drove down from New York with a bunch of people in a caravan limousines, and I was part of the entourage, to go to Ali's camp to take a Polaroid photograph of him for the basis of the portrait. That's how he worked. And I had published a book about Ali a couple of years earlier, I think it was. And so we got to the camp. Ali was very much there, but he was very confrontationally rude to Warhol in a way I'd never seen him be. He'd always been very, very polite. Anyway, a long story ensued, and I talked to him and spent some time with him and called him out, and we did the sitting, we got the picture right and stuff. But afterwards, I said to Ali, have you written any poetry recently? He said, yeah, come to my cabin. And so he took Andy and myself and a couple to his cabin. And he read a beautiful little ditty about flying on the Concorde and stuff and how cool it was. And then he sat down, and we all sat down. And he had this huge briefcase next to him, which was wide open. And he pulled out a huge stack of index cards. And I knew what we were in for, because this is when he would give a lecture based on black Muslim philosophy. You know, one of these things, I'm going to make you feel like a kindergarten child. You got no idea what I got here, and stuff. And he started telling Andy Warhol, looking directly into his eyes. Ali was sitting here at a coffee table, and he looked right into his eyes the whole time. And he ranted to him about how he was responsible for homosexuality, marching in the streets, they're marching in the streets. I can't take my little child down the street. Two men screwing the cover of a magazine. He started screaming at him. It was really an amazing experience. We were in a sort of log cabin, Ali's log cabin, you know. And it went on for a long time. It went on for 29 minutes. I tape recorded it. And I just was thinking, Andy's going to get up and walk out at some point, but then I'm involved in a business deal because Andy's making a lot of money out of doing this portrait of him, right? So I just want to screw that up. And so suddenly I see, now I'd spent 2 years recording interviews with Ali. I knew how he talked and his patents and stuff. And suddenly I see him start, goes like, I don't know what happened. I can't talk no more. I'm talked out. And I knew exactly what happened. Andy Warhol had a way of turning his eyes into blades and cutting you up with his eyes in a way that would just totally discombobulate you. You'd stagger away, like, what happened? and it happened to Ali right in front of me. So it's like a heavyweight championship fight in which Warhol got a knockout in the 14th round. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bockris. Now, do we have any more questions? All right, well, Mr. Bockris, I have one for you.
Okay, good.
You've done biographies, and you knew to watch. So,
I've got some water.
well, you knew to watch so many people who became eventually were influential in the culture, both in their time and still in ours. It's easy to see that how they would be so influential in retrospect, but it's always hard to see who's going to be luminaries in your own time. Was there a particular quality you knew to look for, or was there a particular skill set you developed to know who to watch and who would eventually be still influential in the long term.
Yeah. The key story in what you're asking about is the resignation of President Nixon in August 1974. Because the resignation of Nixon changed a huge amount in the United States. It collapsed the trust in the presidency, it collapsed the trust in authority, and it brought into the foreground, unexpectedly, in the mid-'70s, many of the key figureheads of the '60s, particularly like Ali, Warhol, Dylan, Burroughs, a number of others, all excelled in that year, '74, you know, and so it was a turning around in the culture. And I was right on that. I was right in the middle of that and watching it and taking part in it and stuff. And I was always most influenced by conversations with people. And the conversations I had with William Burroughs or with Andy Warhol were by far the most interesting conversations I had, you know, at the time on tape recording interviews. So I recognized they both were really good talkers. And the key to talking to Burroughs was to have a couple of drinks with him. And then he would really talk well, you know, and so would I. You know, and so I did a whole book of conversations between Burroughs and Warhol at dinner time together, you know, and stuff. So they were both obviously much larger than just of that decade. They were huge artists of stretched really from the end of the Second World War up till the time they died, and they're still very much part of the canon and the culture. I think that they both are culture heroes. I think I mentioned this earlier on. They both were culture heroes, Burroughs and Warhol. They had a charisma, a kind of leadership quality, almost maybe a semi-military quality of organizing, like events. There was a thing called the Nova Convention in New York in 1978, which is a great celebration of William Burroughs' life and career, which became the beginning, really, of the beat punk period of the 80s, when all these different tribes came together for this event, William Burroughs event, and people you never heard of came, like Basquiat and Haring and so forth. So, yeah, I was living in very historic times, and obviously I was right in the sense that these are the people who've lasted longest and stuff. And Muhammad Ali is a whole other story. That's a very sad story. But on a, okay.
Thank you very much. Is there any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Thank you. This is probably a lowball question, but I want you to know I have no intention of writing a novel, Mike, but I'd like to know a process question. I thought your reading of the conversations was exceptionally illuminating. Which comes first, the conversation or the writing of it? Do you write it down and read it to yourself and say it sounds right, or do you read it, maybe record it, and then transcribe it? It's a process question.
Well, I live only about a half a block from the, oh, let me have this picture.
Oh, of course.
I live only about a half a block from the YMCA, where a lot of these conversations take place, and so it's a pretty simple matter to get back home and, you know, type it up. And I don't really have to do much with them. You know, I sort of look at this book as it's like, it's all, if you see it, it's all little fragments, right? And those I write like you would write a poem, you know, because a poem is about now. Like a poem is sort of always in the present. It's just about a moment, most poems, you know what I mean? Rather than telling a story. So my approach is to just put these little fragments together like a mosaic, you know?
Do you read them back to yourself and say, that sounds like how it went
Oh,
down?
yeah, sure. I work on them a lot. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
We have a dinner appointment coming up.
Want some coffee? Cold coffee? No? Okay. Champagne later.
That's probably it.
All right, well, I just want to make sure, does anyone have one last question we can ask our authors? Yes.
My question is for, well, I guess any of you guys could answer it, but I felt like I'm sorry, I can't like do the name thing.
Victor?
Yes. So in terms of like people like getting assassinated and stuff, what the fuck? Why was that happening? Why do you get blacklisted just because you're making art? Just curious, because I'm a stranger to that.
Well, I'm going to give you a very concise answer to that.
Thank you.
And it's just my opinion, but based on what I know and what I've sort of read about over the years and stuff, it seems like the CIA made a contract with the mafia to kill people outside the country, so there'd be no footprints or fingerprints with the CIA. Then at some point, this combination came back into the country. And I think it's, it's been widely written about that the CIA and the mafia killed both the Kennedy brothers. And at that time, we had been assassinating people. We assassinated Lumumba in the Congo, for example, in 61 or 2. I know, but we were involved in it and stuff. And so it's, we're trying to assassinate Castro the whole time when this is going on. So assassination, unfortunately, became part of the language. We kind of introduced it ourselves, you could say, in a way. We assassinated Diem in Vietnam. Yeah, we really assassinated a lot of people. That was the American way. I'm not being critical, I'm an American. I am an American. But, history, the early 60s is a very violent time. I guess all times are really violent times these days. History was so. I feel there's so much that can be learned from stuff like just the life of Andy Warhol. If anyone's interested in being an artist or interested in how art works, to understand how his life worked was so but entertaining and educative at the same time. There's a lot to be learned from that whole period of time. That's why I keep bringing it up myself. It's because I'm fascinated by it. And I'm always wondering, is there someone else out there who's some kind of great cultural leader, some kind of beacon of light in the mass darkness and stuff? And it just doesn't seem to be anyone like that around at the moment. Maybe I'm sure I know, whatever. That's the end of that one. Yeah, assassination. They stopped it after a while.
Glad for that.
Well, thank you all so much for coming, and a big thank you to our 3 authors for reading with us today and answering our questions.
You'll come to dinner.